So back to you, Teng Phee. You were looking at the period of the emergency, the first emergency, 48 to 60, and so that is a few years before Jack started his research in Malaysia, right? And you are doing the research 45 years later on, and you spoke to many of the new villagers. In terms of the villagers adjusting to the resettlement and the campaign of trying to win over their hearts and minds, what did people tell you when you interview them?
Yeah, I think overall to say, even though I have visited about 150 for my first 3 months in the year 2006, yeah, and eventually I selected 4 as my case studies, yeah, and I was constantly reminded by a few people the criteria that I chose my case studies might be too much focusing on the so-called black area, meaning they were heavily influenced by the communist guerrilla back into the during the emergency era. And when we refer to a black area, there will be more so-called incidents that say the officer might be killed, or shot by the guerrilla communists. And then there were even the grocery shop, they will be robbed by the communists. So in that case, the people or the villagers who were living back then, their perception might be slightly different as compared to those who live nearer to, let's say, a town, and because of the security issue. So I would say in my oral history recollection with the new villagers, they actually portray different pictures in terms of winning heart and mind. I agree that to a certain degree, the British authority provided basic services and facility in terms of modernity, in terms of provide secure and modern life to the villagers. But in terms of the processes, during the relocation, a lot of oral history, they will reflect that. Let's say pick one example, compensation. Okay, when you look at the SOP, once the site was chosen, based on the basics, let's say the soil quality, water potential, employment opportunities, security. Once the site was chosen, and then they were put behind barbed wire. And according to SOP, there were basic infrastructure, police posts or station, a school, dispensary, community hall, even closer to an old town, there will be a pipe water or electricity. Yeah, and one of the, according to the SOP, would be a compensation for those who were resettled from their own origin, kampong or area. Yeah, and there will be a receipt issued to the villagers. Yeah, and many of them actually mentioned that even after so many years, they did not get compensation from the authorities. Yeah, and the other thing would be notice of relocation. Yeah, so according to SOP again, supposedly they might need to issue 1 week or 2 weeks in advance. Yeah, but because of the emergency, so as Jack has highlighted just now, in such a hurry, and also because of the black area, so they might relocate those people in the dawn of the day, so that people wouldn't run away. So this is some of the things. Of course, this is vary from one village to the other. And my experience with those who lived through the era, I can still strongly sense the insecurity, inside them. So one example, when I conducted one interview with one local lady. So she was quite happily to share her memory with me, right from the beginning, and then it has to wait until one of her family members come back, and then she made a call to her mom at that time, and stop her from the interviews, and from that moment onwards, actually I couldn't have further conversation. She would just give excuse. I can't remember anything. So it has been so many years ago. So nothing to share with me. So that kind
Why
of
do you think that happened? Why do you think the daughter did that?
because later on I checked with her privately. Before I left the house. So she said she actually her daughter called. And one reason she mentioned is they never know that whether or not this oral interview, once it was written, whether in the future they will be used against them by the authority. So these are something I think back to what Jack has mentioned, the access of confidential files. And especially, I think when you come to the state level, meaning I have the opportunity to look through quite a number of, let's say, Selangor secretarial, para secretariat files, and those who might be capture what actually happened on the ground. So there will be like a district level, and then the respective new village in terms of the relocation process. So it of course show the official discourse about the grand narrative about the success of the so-called the emergency, the resettlement. Another thing I would like to check about the concentration camp, the concept highlighted by Jack just now. My experience is, to a certain degree, the new villages back in the 2000s, some of the new villages, they still use this term when I had the opportunity, to chit chat with them. And I also try to explain the difference between, concentration camp, in German, and it's not that similar to the experience in Malaya. But
What's the term in Chinese?
集中营,
They use that term, or they
Yes.
say in dialect, I guess.
It can be in Cantonese, 集中营, and some will just directly use this term, 集中营, so they will have this kind of perception about they were relocated and then concentrated behind barbed wire. And the nature, of course, of the subject is slightly different. But the perception, they keep on using this kind of terminology. It means something, And at least on 3 new villages, when I conducted my in oral history, one in the Selangor, the other one in Kelantan, and Pahang. They keep using this term, concentration camp, 集中营, to refer their resettlement experience during the emergency. So it's interesting, I think, to listen to their voices, and try to analyze what's behind this terminology to them.
I guess that's the strength of and the purpose of oral history, right? Jack, I want to ask you about Anthony Short a little bit. I can actually see his book on my shelf, right? His book is called In Pursuit of Mountain Rats. That's right. Is that the one? How did he come across? I mean, what was his priorities at the time? When you met him, right? Was he very supportive of your research?
Oh yes, he was. He was appreciative of the material I gave him on the resettlement because he had not had the time. He was about to leave Malaysia. His tour was up at the university, and he was really working very hard trying to get the information. And he was very supportive. He came to the airport to see me off with his two sons, and he invited me for Christmas dinner. So he was a very kind man. And he went to back home and went to Scotland and worked at a university there. And that's where I lost track of him. I could not access him on the internet. So that I was very sorry about that. I wish I knew whether he was still alive or not.
Did you have much chance to like discuss, the new villages with him? I'm just wondering what was his view of the new villages and the whole process of resettlement.
He, other than just talking to me about the documents I was getting, he did not. I gave him the documents that I got, and he didn't seem to be very interested in questioning me about that because he was so busy doing his military things. But he was certainly interested, and he took the files, and I think he probably managed to use them because he had good coverage when I got a copy of his book, and he had a good analysis of the whole program.
And what about the Malaysian government or the MCA? I suppose they also got a copy of your research?
I gave them some of the articles that I wrote. I didn't have, as I told you, I quickly became interested in getting a job back in the U.S. and then I was doing Poropase, and so I was a little surprised when this last couple of weeks I went through my dissertation, and I was surprised at all the information I had. I'd been able to get a portion of Mr. Short's or Professor Short's book on the new villages and how they were set up, and I have an appendix with that information. I was surprised at all I had managed to get in the way of material. That's so long since I had looked at it. I would like to make one point, though. We were talking about the attitude of the villagers towards the government. Probably the low point was the food restriction campaign under the Briggs Plan. They restricted food for everyone in Malaya. It wasn't just the new villages. And for example, if you went to a provision shop and bought some canned goods, they had to open the canned goods there. They couldn't sell it legally if it was not open, so that it would spoil if they tried to take it into the jungle and keep it there. And there was, after the incidents with Gurney and some of the ambushes and some of the attacks on estates, they cut the ration. And it was very, very low ration, mainly rice. And this, for example, with a rubber tapper who was going out at 6:30 in the morning and not coming back till afternoon and could only take out water for himself for that day. This cut production. So the estate managers were after the government to do something about this. But it turned out that while it was very draconian and has received a great deal of condemnation, it in fact was one of the most critical points for the success of resettlement and the emergency. There began to be such shortages in the jungle that the guerrillas were surrendering. And this was a great addition to the campaign against the communists in the jungle. But it was a time also that, as I said, the British began to bring more of the Malaysian people into their planning and into their cooperation, and with the animosity of Europeans as well as the people in the new villages about the food restrictions, it really began to mark a change in the way that the emergency went. That the people began to see more advantages. It was not an overnight thing. They did not suddenly want to kiss every British soldier they saw, but it was a marked improvement in the way resettlement was conducted and operated, and together with the food restrictions and the white areas. For example, the average attacks during the day by the guerrillas was in the teens when they began the Briggs plan. And by the time just before the end of the emergency, it was 0.6 attacks per day. And this was obviously an indication that the resettlement program and the emergency was beginning to come to a close, and that the British and the Malaysian government were winning.
Right. Thanks, Jack. I think, whether we want to call it a concentration camp or not, there were certain successes and mistakes and failures that both of you have kind of unearthed, right, through your very different research, geographical survey versus oral history and historical research, right? So I think that is important for us to take note of. So that gives us a better idea of this side of the emergency that is often not so much emphasized compared to the military and political aspects of it. I'm just wondering, Teng Phee, you have any questions for Jack?
Yeah. I'm so curious. By the time when you went to your field trip in 1963, in terms of family collection, would the new villagers share like old photographs, old documents, like what you have mentioned, rice card, home guard card, dapper cards? There are all kind of documents, that they will share with the researcher like you.
People in the settlements themselves.
Yeah.
Well, as was the case when I was working in Potong Pasir, obviously I'm an Angmo, and they had bad experiences with white people in the form of the military and many of the government representatives. So I tried to not do anything that would make them more suspicious than simply who I was. And in the case of working in Potong Pasir, I had university students, and they were very successful in gaining the trust of the residents. I had no such people. I just had translators that I didn't know, and that I would see them for a few of the villages in a particular area, and then I would never see them again. And I didn't really want to ask them. I didn't take any photographs. I didn't do anything that I thought would upset them and make them less likely to cooperate, because they began to wonder maybe I was with Special Branch, or I didn't know whether they would recognize an American accent, or a British accent, or who it might be. So no, I did not collect any information of that sort.
Yep. I have no further question. I just want to thank Jack, for your wonderful research that the younger generation like us, we can actually use your research and then to delve into further in terms of the Chinese New Village and the emergency in Malaysia. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, as a matter of fact, I have been extremely fortunate in that in the incident of one person who became a Facebook friend. She was in Sadai New Village in Johor, and I understand it's now been replaced by the airport. But her mother and father were teachers in the Sinai New Village, and unfortunately, she was very young, so she did not have the same experiences as she would have if she was older, because she had moved into Singapore not long actually after I had gone from Malaysia. But we've become very good friends. They were just here staying with us a couple of weeks ago, she and her husband. And we've had some discussions, but she seemed a bit reluctant to talk too much about her experiences there.
I know, Jack, you have come back to Singapore, right? Have you ever gone back to Malaysia and revisited some of those new villages?
No, Mr. Short, Professor Short, talked to the government, and they were concerned about having a place where I could deal with the documents. I was initially, as I said, in the security officers' quarters, and then they appointed a new one, and I was put in a place where it was special branch. And in fact, the building was split in half, and half was special branch. There was a Malay sergeant who sat right behind me who thought I was CIA, and he kept making nasty cracks about the CIA, trying to get a rise out of me. The other half of the building was actually where the war up on the Thai border was being fought. And I had gone in one day expecting to do some work, and nobody was there. It was a holiday, and they were all gone. And I thought, well, I've gone through security up here. I'm going to do some work. And suddenly a British officer came in the door and he said, "Would you like a cuppa?" And I said, "Yes, that would be nice." He started down the hall, and I knew there was a point where I was not supposed to go beyond that point. And I said, no, I can't go in there. And he says, "Oh, come on. I went in, and there were the maps with all the movements and the positions of the military. And I was a little nervous about that cup of coffee, but nothing happened, and I was very fortunate that I got to see that. I had a very good friend who I became eventually a brigadier general in the Malaysian Army. He was in Indian Malaysia. And when I met him, he was a young lieutenant at the Merdeka ceremonies, one of the flag people for the ceremony. And he was married to a Peace Corps volunteer. And he was one of my closest friends in life. And he just died last year. It was, he was very helpful. He provided me with guidance as to where I might want to go to find things initially. And it wasn't actually anything I could do. I didn't get into any place that he recommended, but he did help me with some maps and other information that he obtained. And it was a very friendly community. I really think that Malaysia was a changing point in my life. I had always been interested. In fact, there are ads now here in the U.S. about using a song, faraway places with strange sounding names, and that was popular when I was in high school. I think that put me on the course of wanting to see places and go places. And it was really, I have still very good friends in Malaysia that are now Facebook friends. And I'm still in contact with his widow. And it really made me want to, I would live here if I live in Singapore or Malaysia if I could, but it's no longer possible.
Jack, I'm just wondering, right? When you were there in Malaysia, the American involvement in the Vietnam War was just beginning to escalate, right? And of course, later on, very soon became full blown, right? Were you ever thinking about, this resettlement program in Malaysia and how kind of connect that with whatever was happening in Vietnam, with the strategic hamlets?
I used to listen to Radio Vietnam, and it was a very strange feeling to be in Malaysia and know that just a few hundred miles away that war was going on. And I've often wondered whether, had I joined the army and gone to there, there was no certainty I would be put anywhere near a strategic hamlet program. I'd probably be in a gun artillery place up on the border with North Vietnam. But I thought I had information that I could help them with. And in fact, they had, as you said, they had come to Malaysia and to do some research on the new villages. And they didn't learn anything. They went there and they took people off the land, and they made more enemies than they did friends. And it's unfortunate that it cost a lot of people lives.
Jack, if I may ask one last question for follow your footstep, right? I know that Sharon Carsten, Judy Strong, they also went to Malaysia to conduct their fieldwork, on the study of Chinese New Village. I'm not sure whether you have the opportunity to keep in touch with those American scholars or even some missionary.
Well, I didn't have any contact other than the Marine Guard that I bought my car from. And I did meet the wife of the labor attaché at the U.S. Embassy, and he bought the car for $290. I made $10 on the car after having it for almost 2.5 years. And I did have an experience that really jarred me while I was working for Mr. Short. I was invited to a party by people at the embassy. And that morning I had been doing some work for Mr. Short, and it was the patrolling methods that the British used in the jungle. And I was at this party, and there were two gentlemen who came over to me and introduced themselves. And they said, "I understand you're doing some work on the New Village." I said, "Yes." And they said, "Have you ever come across anything on the patrolling methods in the jungle that the British use?" I was really shocked. And I said, no, I'm sorry. I just look at the housing. I don't look at the military things. And when I came back to the U.S., I went up to Northwestern. My advisor, who was the head of the department, wanted me to come up and spend spring quarter there working on my dissertation. And he actually wanted me to come up. The one course he taught was in the spring, the introductory course, and he wanted me to do the exams for the course. And I went up to the graduate room one day, and one of them said, "You had a phone call." I said, "Oh, I did?" And they said, "Yes." They said they wouldn't tell us who they were. And it was very strange. It was a woman, and she wouldn't give me any information. She just said that she would call again later. And I did. And before I had gone to Malaysia, there had been a representative from the CIA who came to the department to try and recruit people, and nobody signed up to go talk to him. And so my advisor, who was head of the department, called me in and said, "Would you please sign up so someone goes and talks to him?" And I had already been accepted for Peace Corps in Thailand, and I was hoping I could go to Malaysia instead. And I said, "No, I'm not interested in any job. I've got a teaching job right now for 1 year, and then I may be going to Thailand." And he said, "Oh," and he gave me his name. So when I called these people back, I said, "Are you friends of this gentleman?" And there was a long pause, and she finally said, "Yes." And so he arranged a meeting, and he came to see me, and all he wanted to get was information about the military things. And I said, "Well, I really don't have time for this right now. I'm working on my dissertation." He said, "Well, I'll give you a tape recorder, and when you have time, you can put your recollections in there." And I never did anything with it. So I had this when I was about to leave and go to my new teaching job. And I called, and it was very funny. My wife drove me to this appointment point, which was a shopping center with a huge parking lot. And out in the middle of this parking lot was this car. And as I got closer to it, I could see a woman sitting in the front seat of the steering wheel, and he was sitting in the back. And I came up, and he opened the door, and I said, "No, I'm sorry. I didn't have time to do anything. Maybe you can contact me while I'm teaching." I never heard from him again. That was the last time I ever heard anything from the CIA. But it was a very strange experience, and it did impress me that they knew what I was doing when I was there. I had to introduce myself to the ambassador as part of my contract, and I suppose they contacted the CIA. but it was the CIA is everywhere, and it was a really sort of strange and unnerving program to know I was being watched, and I realize that's not part of the podcast. So
No,
no,
not
it's just
really. No, not at all. I mean, I'm gonna ask the Teng Phee the same thing, right? Did you ever experience this kind of surveillance yourself?
Not
yeah.
really. Yeah. I think in the year 2006, we have to apply a
Research
research
permit,
permit. Yeah,
right?
under
Even as a
PMO.
Malaysian citizen?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So with the special permission, it did not help me much. You know, by the time I used this research permit to show it to MCA, yeah, actually they were a bit surprised. You know, yeah, why as a Malaysian researcher, and then you
Yeah.
show this Prime Minister Office research unit, permission, yeah, and not really helpful. On the ground, actually, I didn't show anything, to do my informants, yeah, and they might feel a bit scared, yeah, and mostly I was taken as a tourist, from Japan or Korean outsider, who came here to understand a little bit about the history of the New Village. Yeah, and sometimes I was mistaken as a school teacher. Yeah, because I think in the years 2000, a lot of university lecturers or professors, they organize their own student to go into New Village to conduct a field survey. Yeah, for their assignments.
Sometimes an innocent small subterfuge can be a useful thing in field work. So at least that's been my experience, because I was afraid people would be suspicious of me because I was white, and that their experiences had not been the very best with white people in their lives. And it turned out that it was needless worry on my part because everybody was always very nice, very cooperative, and they tried their best. My problem was more with the translators trying to understand why I wanted this information. And they eventually caught on, most of them, but they were a little embarrassed to be asking these questions of the people who were being interviewed. And it was an educational experience for me as well. It wasn't just for the people who read the book or read the reports or papers.
So Jack, if today there are American students who want to come to Malaysia or Singapore and uh, you know do a survey, a study of the locals, what kind of advice would you give them?
Be sensitive. Don't try to be an American, because we
What
have a
does that mean?
reputation.
What does that mean to be an American?
Well, Americans are noted for being very outspoken, very brash, very loud, and
Right.
you know, people in many cases are not terribly fond of Americans, especially if there's something like the Vietnam War or what's happening in various parts of the world today. People just are suspicious. They think that Americans may not be the very best people to be giving information to. So if you are gentle in going in, you don't ask sensitive questions right off the bat, and as I told you last time when I worked in Poto Pasir, I wore a tennis hat that made me look a little silly, and I intentionally tried to look a little silly because I felt somebody from special branch or somebody would not want to look silly. They tended to be a little more authoritarian.
That's good
But
advice. To look silly.
it,
That's a start. To make people feel at ease, right? Isn't it?
well, if somebody indicates a bit of reluctance to answer a question, you don't push. You just go on to the next question or on to the next person. And that's something you just have to live with, that your research may not be perfect from your point of view. And very often you could ask a different question that would give you the same information, but not so directly.
Yeah, I have
But
a
I do
question.
wish I could be in Singapore to have a nice conversation with you. You both have such interesting backgrounds and interesting information, and I could learn a lot if I were able to come back to Singapore. But I'm legally blind and I'm profoundly deaf, and I have no cartilage in my knee, so I don't think I'll be making any more trips anywhere, let alone back to Singapore. I hope to get one more trip, but I'm not going to get it, I think.
Yeah, your mind is still very much there, Jack. Your mind and your memory. I think I would love to see how you were doing research in the New Villages in the 1960s. If we could have a video of that, that would have been great.
Well, I was really, looking back on it as I have the last few days, I realized that somebody was out there looking after this silly American who came out there totally unprepared to do research in the new villages, because I had not thought about a car, I had not thought about a house, I had not thought about how I was going to communicate with the new villagers, and it all just fell into place. One of the odd things was I found out about my house because I had been a graduate student at my university one year they had a cartographic project they were doing in Atlas of Ohio with Ohio State University. And I taught cartography eventually. And I had gotten married and I was living in a house in the university town, and there were 3 apartments. And I had one of the ground floor apartments, and there were 3 people who were immigrants or refugees, really. One was from Hungary and with the Hungarian Revolution, and one was from Singapore. And when I got to Malaysia, since I had been almost in the Peace Corps, I was told to come to Peace Corps headquarters in Kuala Lumpur. And there I met the staff. And there was a young woman who was one of the secretaries. And it turned out she went in my university town, there was the state university, then there was a women's college, and she had been at the women's college. And the guy from Singapore who was in my house had been her husband. She was now divorced. And here I was in Malaysia, and I had lived in the house with her ex-husband, and she had been just around the corner from me where I was there. And it's a very small world, I discovered. And he was the one who told me about the house that she knew was vacant, and I went there and got a place to live. So people were very helpful. And my car, I don't know if you know what a 1947 MGTC looks like, but it's got high wire wheels and wire wheel on the back, and it's a low sports car. And it was a great attraction. I can remember the day that they were having the national election, I was going up the East Coast, headed for Terengganu, and all the kids came running out to this road and were waving and yelling and so delighted to see me. I was giving the royal wave as I went up, and it was an amazing experience. But you could look down through the floor and see the highway underneath. All the dials didn't work. I had to have a stick for the gas tank to see how much gas I had. So it was like an armored car. The steel on the fenders, it had the long sweeping fenders, and it was so much fun. I wish I'd been able to bring it back to the U.S.
I just have one last question for you, Teng Phee. Was the Malaysian government interested in your research? I mean, they gave you a research permit, right?
Yeah, I would say as of now, not much. Yeah. And the version I published is in English. Yeah. So I would say quite a number of new villagers, or local friends, they will encourage me to have a Chinese version. Yeah. Meaning to reach out to more Chinese new villagers. I think a version of Chinese translation might be good, for largest audience to actually have to access it. Yeah. So to me, I would say that from oral history, those elderly villagers, they could still recall their traumatic memories, and there are multiple, in some cases, resettlement since the beginning of the emergency. Yes, so those value oral history, we can link to the keywords like social displacement and personal economic loss and psychological impact in terms of how they perceive the Malaya emergency and also the whole process of resettlement scheme. Those collective memory, I think, be it valued by the government or not, actually I'm not so concerned about that. But more importantly, as a local researcher, I hope this will provide a picture of those faceless and voiceless small people like my grandparent generation, and hopefully that might be able to contribute local knowledge, be part of Malaysian history in general.
There are very few survivors left from that period. It was 81 years ago that I was there, and that length of time, even the small children are going to be very elderly now. And I think you and I had a great experience and had an opportunity to learn something that can be of value to the residents of Malaysia and Singapore now, because we remember it because we're now old, and or at least I'm. And I find with Potong Pasir, for example, that the people who live in the Potong Pasir estate are very interested in what was there before the estate was and what it was like in there. When I post a picture on road in Singapore, I get a lot of remarks. I've had as many as 200 or 300 people. I had a picture of two Samsui women with two young modern people waiting for a bus, and it was an extremely popular figure. They wanted to know about the past. And that's, I think, one of the failings, or very few failings of Singapore, is that they've lost a lot of their history.
I couldn't have said the conclusion better myself. So thank you
very much for including me in your project.
No,
I
not
really
at
have
all.
found it very educational.
For me as well, definitely. So very happy to have, today Jack and Teng Phee share about the people inside the new villages in Malaysia. One is during the emergency and the other one just afterwards. The views of the research of a geographer and the research of a social historian. And that's really, been wonderful to tell us, how people fared, how people coped in such a difficult period of time. And it's a good, I think, reminder to tell us that research can be impactful, can be meaningful, whether it's geography, whether it's history or nostalgia, to the communities that we study. So thank you very much again, Jack and Teng Phee. I'll let you know when the episode is coming out.
Okay, that would be very nice. I really appreciate that. And I think your project is a really, really valuable, and I'm glad that you are doing it, because I think if they are only some unaware of it now, and they will learn about it as time passes, and you will be a very valuable addition to Singaporean history. Very nice meeting you. I wish I had more time to talk to you about what you found, because that would give me a nice update on my work.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Jack. Yeah. Thanks, Kasing.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.